Here's the thing. Classical music is dying.
Entire lifetimes of work, literal libraries of pain, beauty, love, and ecstasy are just a car ride away. Yet in 2002, only 11.6% of Americans said they had been to a classical music concert within the past 12 months. In 2012, that number dropped to 8.8%. That's almost a 25% decrease over the course of 1 decade.
That is massive. People in our community are freaking out over this, right? Orchestras are folding, we don't have any money, what do we do? We're going to try and tackle all of that in the next 8.5 minutes.
First things first, everyone's concerned with how we can save classical music, and nobody seems to be talking about why it should be saved.
Well, the modern world seems to think classical music is outdated and boring, right?
Wrong! Classical music epitomizes one of the most effective ways of communicating complicated human emotions, and has stood the test of time through hundreds of years because it's so good at it.
But John, I don't get it. It doesn't have any words, so how am I supposed to know what it's trying to say? That's the beauty of it. Listeners are able to hear a piece of music and are encouraged to project their own experiences and emotions onto it, rather than being told exactly what to think, as is the case with most pop music.
Classical music has the ability to not just talk about an emotion, but create that emotion within the listener and allow them to experience it in real time. Although the experience itself is fleeting, classical music has benefits throughout our lives. It has all these educational benefits. It's been proven to result in better childhood development and can even benefit our adult psyches.
And just as it plays a large role in the development of our personal identities, people's cultural identities also have strong ties to their musical traditions. Just look at the development of jazz. It was born in the early 20th century, rising out of slave song traditions, and it's grown into this incredible symbol of African American culture, community, and pride, and ultimately had a huge impact on the civil rights movement.
Music isn't only used to embody cultural unity, it can also inspire and influence events, altering the making of history as we know it. For example, the Prison Reform movement was inspired by Johnny Cash.
I'm talking about them. Folsom Prison Blues. That whole thing. The Beatles had a huge impact on the anti-war movement. All we need is love. Ba-ba-da-da-da.
Conversely, anti-Semitism that ignited the Holocaust was inspired by the writings of Wagner, this old German composer dude, and his music became emblematic of the Nazi Party, something that served to effectively unite them under a common goal.
That's why we have a national anthem. All major countries do. It forges a sense of community between us and encourages us to, consciously or unconsciously, work towards a familiar goal.
We've all heard the classic idiom before, music can change the world, but here's the truth. Music can't change the world. Music can change people, and people change the world.
If music doesn't change something about you, something about the way you think, feel, act, or exist, then it sucked at being music. Here's the thing. Classical music can't affect people if it doesn't have anybody there to affect. People need to be showing up, staying, and coming back because it changed them.
So why aren't people coming back? Well, for starters, we have huge representation issues. Classical music's most performed artists in order are Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, Brahms, and Tchaikovsky. All amazing composers with incredible lives, all old white men. In the top 100 conductors in 2017, 5 of them were women. Top 100 composers? 0 women.
In the 2014-2015 concert season, the 22 largest U.S. symphony orchestras played 85 works by American composers. 100% of those composers were white. 100% of those composers were white.
Aside from the whole old dead white dude composer thing, let's talk about the listener's perspective for a second. Let's assume the listener's familiar with the canon and they like them. So why isn't that listener coming to the concert hall?
Well, that has a lot to do with the atmosphere and mindset surrounding the concert hall experience itself. For one, audiences tend to not feel free to express their emotions at the concert hall. Think about it. The last time you were at that rock concert, you were dancing and cheering your head off, right? But the last time you were at the symphony, everyone within a 50-foot radius of you shot you dirty looks when you sneezed. When you're sitting still, sweating bullets, trying not to make a sound, that tends to lead to detachment from the music, and boom, you're asleep.
There's also the very steep learning curve needed to appreciate classical music. A lot of pieces are super interesting because of their historical context. What dictator was the work dedicated to? Which extramarital affair inspired it?
All super interesting questions, but one gets the impression if you don't know Bach's birth date, Handel's hometown,
Beethoven's blood type,
or favorite flavor of ice cream, that's the big one, then you don't belong here.
It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? It's very difficult to make any sort of headway in the self-actualization segment, the whole point of classical music concerts, if you can't get past the belonging segment, since you don't know Chopin's second cousin twice removed's cat's name, as everyone seems to expect you to.
All of those problems, not to mention the fact that nearly infinite media is just a swipe away, and we have access to endless recordings at the touch of a screen. These are just some of the problems our community is currently grappling with, and it almost forces us to ask ourselves the question, why should anybody want to go to a concert hall?
Well, the concert hall is supposed to facilitate the base human connection and emotional catharsis that is what art is all about.
And what people often forget is, every era of music at one point or another was pop music. People used to go and see Mozart in much the same way they would go and see a Beyonce concert today. It was a unique experience, it was incredible social currency, and the people who were rising and staying at the top, all are composers who are staying on the cutting edge. Mozart redefined the opera. Beethoven redefined the symphony. Gershwin redefined everything about classical music.
The thing is, classical music seems to be clinging to the glory days of yesteryear. The concert hall experience has changed very little over the past 100 years. It's the whole concept of artistic Darwinism, the whole survival of the fittest mentality, essentially meaning that anything that fails to adapt, well, dies. And classical music is on the endangered species list.
It's only survived as long as it has because there are some truly incredible works that have been performed and composed.
But the whole point of classical music is to reach people, to connect with people. And yet we're actively avoiding the avenues that will lead us to actually doing that. We've created a closed ecosystem, one that relies much too heavily on an aging demographic.
The concert hall in the modern day needs to evolve in order to compete with the terabytes of media being produced daily online. So, what if we brought in the lights and projections typical of a stadium pop concert? What if the music was explained in an engaging and accessible way to audiences during performances?
What if you could clap between the movements of a symphony? Countless studies have shown that audiences respond to people they feel they can identify with. There's a lot of stuff we can program, works by women, African, Asian, South American composers who have been composing since well before Mozart and who have gotten next to no recognition.
Encourage multimedia collaborations with our friends in the visual arts, film, dance, theater, etc.
If someone's coming to the symphony, let them wear jeans.
If you love it, let it grow. Let it change.
Classical music is only going to survive if we allow it to adapt to our modern experiences and seek out new audiences. As an example of what we're talking about, I have synesthesia, which basically means I associate sounds with colors and textures.
And as we've discussed, attempting to communicate something that is so uniquely a part of your experience can be very difficult to do with just words.
We took this really inaccessible form of classical music, known as serialism, and attempted to make it accessible through these few lines of introduction, a personal connection, some projection mapping technology, and these crazy awesome musicians.
We call it Inside Her Head. Hope you enjoy.